Good morning, Buck Bookers. My name is Buck, as you may well know by this point, and welcome back to another episode of Buck's Books. So, at one point, you may recall that I said that I was going to do a two-parter for the evolutionary psychology, biology, anthropology book, How Women Got Their Curves and Other Just So Stories. Since I made this promise in winter of 2024, at the end of the year, my YouTube inbox has been flooded with hostile emails from degenerate perverts who are saying, "Damn it, Buck, we need you to explain to us why women are shaped that way and what's the deal with the orgasms." And I said, okay, fine. I made a promise and I'm a man of my word. I'm going to say the name of the book again, so that way I can do the thing where I pause for a second and then it goes into the theme song, and then after the theme song we can do the actual review. So the name of the book is still How Women Got Their Curves and Other Just So Stories by David Barash. Doesn't he have another name? One second. No, it's just P. By David P. Barash. Off the rip, obviously, the female orgasm is Bronze Age mythology. Never happened. Could never happen. It's all fake. And if you have been suckered by a woman who A, tried to convince you that women are capable of doing that, or B, heinous, faked it for you, she's just after your Bitcoin, my man. It's all just one big Bitcoin scam. So keep that in mind and keep your head on a swivel. Here are the suggestions that our boy David Barash led with. All right. So first of all, what he's after is figuring out why they do it. What's the point of doing it? Because with dudes, it's pretty straightforward. I mean, it's built into the system by which the semen is communicated, which leads to reproduction. So it's a pivotal part of reproduction. Not necessarily so with women. They don't really need to get off in order to reproduce, and since evolutionary biology is all about passing on the genes and sexual selection to the point of passing on the genes, what would be the evolutionary advantage? Why would women have the potential? So proceeding forward, disregard everything I said before about how it's fake, because if we did that, then none of these would make any sense, because they are explanations of why it happens. And if we are working from the assumption that it doesn't happen, that's not much of a book. This whole chapter is just moot. So it does happen. It does. These are a little less goofy than the explanations for why the evolutionary origin of the noble honker. However, they're still very goofy. Let me lay out why. So, the first suggestion is this developed as a means of facilitating fertilization by keeping the woman lying down. It's possible, after the payload is delivered, so to speak, to optimize the process of the transmission and possibly for the conception. Could be advantageous to not screw things up that much by jumping around. But the problem is, it's not really like putting gas in the car. I know that you've heard that fear-mongering, but it's true fear-mongering, that even if some sperm gets on the sort of exterior situation, it can travel through the mucous membranes and still lead to pregnancy. Your chances are highly decreased, but if you're both supremely fertile, and you're both in the appropriate stage of your life, then it has happened. It can happen. So it doesn't seem like it would be too evolutionarily valuable to just keep her seated for the duration, for just an extra couple of minutes. And also, I don't think that's universal, because there are a lot of women who just get real energetic after that happens, and then bouncing off the walls, looking at themselves in mirrors and picking things up in the room and stuff. So like, I don't know if we can necessarily ascribe it to the tendency to keep ladies lazier, because they don't always stay lazier. And if this were evolutionarily selected for, they would all be lazier. Predator avoidance, post-copulatory quiescence. So the idea there is similar in that you remain seated in order to not get ate, because after maybe the brain don't work so good, which it's not supposed to, so that's a good sign. But like, if you if you ever look at brain scans of what happens during the female orgasm, enormous pieces of it just shut down. They just go offline. So in that circumstance, assume that things haven't come, they're still not doing words so good. Things haven't booted back up. It's like a computer running Windows 95 right after. And then they wander out of whatever weird caveman bushes that you two just hooked up in, and there's a cheetah, dude. She's not prepared for the cheetah. She's not prepared to escape the cheetah. The system is down. So it makes a kind of sense, but a stupid kind of sense. Because I don't think there would be that much evolutionary advantage, considering how noisy the act often is, which would draw predators in the first place. It's just, it's switching too much. Now we're gonna hide? Why are you gonna hide now? You blew it, dude. Like, if we were evolutionarily selecting for being stealthy, the entire performance would be stealthy, and that's something you have to condition. That's something you have to train yourself to do, like a ninja when you're a teenager and you're not allowed to have girls in the house. Copulatory reward. Positive reinforcement, pretty straightforward, makes sense to me. Because if there's no... I like this one because if there's no other imperative for women to be having sex, then all of it would be, like, the entirety of the human mating ritual from the inception of the species would work according to this like weird sitcom standard where men always want it and women tolerate it in order to get what they want, which is like the resources and the opportunity to complain about housework or whatever. And that's not real life. That's sad, weird boomer mythology, So we sort of have to assume that copulatory reward is involved, but it can be argued that it still feels good even if it doesn't result in an orgasm. But I find that argument to be sad. You deserve better, queen. And king, for when it happens to guys, because that happens to guys. You ever hear about that? How like a dude will just like retain his situation. So like he will participate in the entirety of the act, but then just decide not to complete, to evacuate. There's no ejaculation at the end of it, so it's just like, oh, it's okay, I'm just doing it for the love of the game, and that's fine, dude. I understand it's about the journey, but that also, I know it's tantra or whatever, and I'm sure I can like align all sort of chakras doing it. It just seems unpleasant to me, but what do I know? I'm just some buck. The byproduct hypothesis, a tag-along consequence of its male counterpart. So you know how dudes have nipples and they don't really need them? This is like the reverse of that. The idea that women do it because dudes do it. So it'll be selected for the next generation, because if one half of the species just suddenly didn't have it anymore, it's going to be less likely to show up in the future, which is going to really screw with the entire process. You know, if nipples just skipped a generation, the babies would die. Well, I mean, now we can just feed them corn syrup and they'd almost survive. They more or less survive. But if we're looking at 100,000 years ago, you take nipples out of the equation. You know, if something goes wrong and there's a mutation that results in no nipples, we're all cooked. Dude, everybody's cooked. So the byproduct hypothesis is the reverse of that. It's the idea that because men have to orgasm in order to propagate the species, it has to remain in sort of the gene pool on both sides. So women get a chance to. It's available to them. Only for those who have the eyes to see, sort of thing. Alright, so next up we got infanticide insurance redux, a spur to multiple partners. You're not gonna like this one. This one's icky. Oh, you might like this one if you're icky. The idea behind the infanticide reduction redux is that it takes a village and you got to keep the village on the hook. So how do you keep the village on the hook? Well, you convince the village that any of them could be responsible for paternity. It's just the human race is one big episode of Maury Povich, right? So if there are 5 dudes in the town, and because of clandestine ovulation and because of a potentially innate promiscuity, any of them could be responsible for the baby's parentage, then the woman benefits from the support and resources of all 5 of these men. You know? And back in a time when that's where the meat came from, and you need the meat to feed the baby, and you need to build the brain correctly. That's a fantastic insurance policy. That's very productive. That's very useful to a woman who would not otherwise be able to hunt a mammoth. Unless they did. We don't know. The anthropologists are like, no, they could have. They have. Sometimes you find spears in a lady grave, so they probably hunted mammoth. Yeah, maybe. That's possible. Why not? I mean, we have no, like, dudes have no better right to hunting mammoths than ladies do. Do you know how big mammoths are, dude? They're preposterously big. They're colossal. They're out in Las Vegas. Well, just outside of Las Vegas, in a little town that has nothing. They're trying to do like a Sudden Valley situation, like from Arrested Development, out on the outskirts of Las Vegas, and it's just desert, and there's nothing there except for now these empty developments that no one lives in yet, and they're planning on building a strip mall, and there are fossil beds, and there's nothing in the fossil beds, but about 20 minutes from the fossil beds there is this ice age learning diorama situation that you can walk through, and it's outside in the desert, and you walk, it's 100 degrees, and you walk around a little 1 mile path, and you see all of these renderings, these sculptures of the different megafauna from the ice age, and one of them is a mammoth, and mammoths are like, dude, mammoths are so much bigger than elephants. Like, elephants are big, don't get me wrong, elephants are big, mammoths are way bigger and way scarier. And like, I am big. I'm only a little over 6 feet, you know, a little over 200 pounds. A mammoth, I can't do anything against a mammoth. So like, you figure you take a sturdy woman who's like 50 pounds lighter than me, something like that. She has as much right to hunt a mammoth as I do, I reckon. Why not? It's not going to make a difference. Just if you look at the differentials between the size of a friggin' mammoth and the size of a human being, why not? Who cares? Go ahead. So that's feminism. I just did feminism. You're welcome. That reminds me. If you like the idea that human beings are designed to be polyamorous and like perpetually horny and like duplicitous, check out the book Sperm Wars. Next one is monogamy, pair bond enhancement, the opposite of what we just said. This is to make the woman like the man too. This is to consider, in this one we consider the possibility that women have feelings, and that's why this developed. It makes sense, because if you look at the way our brains work, one of the reasons that hookup culture tends to be so poisonous is because when you are indiscriminately hooking up with anything. Every time you have an orgasm, your brain releases oxytocin, and oxytocin is what bonds you to anything. Oxytocin is what causes love to happen. Oxytocin is what makes life worth living for all intents and purposes. You have the serotonin, the oxytocin, the endorphins and kephalins. You get those are the things that make you feel good. Dopamine doesn't make you feel good. Dopamine sucks. Dopamine makes you go to work. Those are the things that make you feel good, and those are the things that you're going to have represented when you have sex. And especially the point of orgasm, which again makes me wonder about the tantric guys, because they're not having that, which seems like a good way to sort of perpetuate what you're doing in hookup culture. But I don't know how much overlap there is between tantric practice and hookup culture, honestly. That's again, like, I've never been into the tantra game, but I've been out of the game too long. I haven't seen those studies, if those studies exist. Out of coffee. All right, let's go. So, enormous flood of oxytocin, especially at the point of orgasm, and that goes both ways, for men or for women. So whatever you happen to be looking at that moment, that's what you're bonding to. Click, and the more you do it, the more oxytocin is released, the better it gets. So if you're one and done, then you are sort of retarding your own ability. God, that's probably going to be one of those words, huh? Those demonetization words. You are interfering with impinging. You are impinging your own ability to interpersonally connect. You're screwing with the way your own oxytocin works. So if we are viewing this through a lens of promoting monogamy, it does. If it's always the same person, you always get more and more oxytocin every time you both orgasm, then it could absolutely promote the expansion of that monogamy. But the problem there is there's no real imperative for it, especially compared to, like, with evolution, you're talking about good enough. You're talking about things that happen because everything's working just fine, why screw with it, which means nothing's going to be perfect. There's no perfection in nature because there doesn't have to be. Nature is adequacy. Nature can get the job done. It doesn't care if it looks good. So this is the monogamy hypothesis is very romantic, and it would work to that end, but it wouldn't have developed for no reason to work to that end, especially in light of these previous ones like the infanticide insurance redux, which is more immediately beneficial to the woman, the child, the species. Natural or sexual selection wouldn't necessarily work for this monogamy. This is like a cool side effect. This is like a neat bonus, but it's not why it happened, probably. But no one knows why it happened because, again, all of this is fake and made up. So if you like it, you can keep it. Go ahead. I don't care. Oh, now we're getting into the fun stuff. So the facilitate fertilization hypotheses, right? We talked about the first one. That was right from the jump. That was keeping the woman lying down. Probably not, but maybe. The facilitate fertilization 2 is the uterine upsuck. Get you one that can do both. So, if you've never heard of the upsuck, it is absolutely something you should Google. The idea is that at the point of orgasm, something wacky, many wacky things happen in the woman's body, but one of the wacky things that happens in the woman's body is that her organs turn into a sort of little Hoover situation, and just draw up whatever happens to be down in the region, the thing at the point of ejaculation that would, in theory, cause it to suddenly close the distance between the point of entry and the egg, which could facilitate that implantation better. Problem there is the upsuck is fake. They've disproved the upsuck. At least they did last time I read, but I haven't read about this in like 10 years, so maybe the upsuck's back on the table. I don't know. I doubt it. I don't know. Maybe. It seems ridiculous to me, but what do I know? No, this isn't even my field of study. I don't consider it a legitimate field of study. The next one is the reduction in flowback, and that is what it sounds like. Nothing gets out. Same concept. Increases, sort of like the way SSRIs work. Reduces the reuptake. So there's more just flowing around between the synapses. Only instead of the synapses, this is instead of neurochemicals in the synapses, this is boy juice in the woman zone. So there you go. Next one is facilitate fertilization for biochemical benefits. It's an antidepressant, ladies. It is. You gotta Google it. You gotta Google it because it's there. They've confirmed on a whole bunch of studies that the women who have unprotected sex, and regardless as to the mucous membrane through which they absorb the goo, it has led to a higher reported quality of life and changes in their own neurochemical profile, which is consistent with the effect of antidepressants. So the facilitation of this fertilization is pretty self-explanatory. Not only does it improve the likelihood of the resulting pregnancy, but it also makes the woman happier, which translates over to the child, because whatever the mother feels, the child feels. So if the mother is in a constant state of stress and paranoia and screaming psychosis, then so is the child, and sometimes that just leads to the fetus being evacuated. Whereas if the mother is happy and calm and generally reporting a higher sense of subjective well-being, then that will translate over to the baby and set the baby up for success and greatly improve the baby's chance of making it into the world in the first place. Fertilization number 5, sire choice. This stems from the idea, we'll get there in a second. This presents the idea that women are going to be a little bit choosier and theoretically prefer men who are capable of pleasing them as men that they want to, as their genetic partners, as the ones that they want to pass on their genes with. And this is very clean. This is very direct. It makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. If you, very reductionist, just break the system down, why not? There are many other factors to consider, and what causes problems in this one is it is predicated on the assumption that they have to do a lot of shopping around, which interferes with the widely held societal patriarchal belief that women should be virgins until they marry and then stay with one man forever, because obviously you got to do some shopping around if you're trying to find one that actually, gets you off. So it's possible. I don't know. It's all fake. Use your imagination. Do you like it? You can like it. It can justify doing any number of horrible things or good things, whatever you want. I don't care. Mate evaluation, same kind of deal. The social and/or genetic quality. So this is contingent on the assumption that a successful performance on the man's part in the, again, not the bedroom because we're talking evolutionary biology, so like in the shrub. Successful performance in the shrub or the isolated cave somehow transmits over representative of the man himself, right? And whether he is genetically sound, fit within the Darwinistic natural selection perspective, or socially sound, suggesting that there is a social component to lovemaking. Might be. Who knows? I feel like there might be an element of charisma that is involved in that. It depends on who you ask, I suppose. But again, this requires us to assume that we are extracting this information only from the point of flagrante contact, right? Like, you didn't have any cues earlier on about genetic potential, about social potential. Whatever socialization, our brains got this big because of these social feedback loops that were created between men and women, and how we're both the choosy ones. Normally it's one or the other, but in humans, everyone's choosing everybody. Everybody can agree or decline, you know? So things got increasingly convoluted and required more and more culture, and then the development of art, and then we started to build cathedrals, and things just got way out of control. So if all of that is already on the table, and all of that exists specifically to communicate social potential, which leads into sexual selection, and then the same thing with genetic quality, there are all of these, everything that we talked about in the previous review, you know, all of these indicators, many of which cannot be faked. So all of these things are on the table, but we're going to assume that orgasm was created in the first place for women as just like an extra level of judging these things. It just don't check out. I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think you think so either. Maybe you do. You're allowed to. I don't care what you do. And the last and wackiest one, parenting potential. So the idea is that a tender man capable of putting in the work necessary to essentially care about whether or not the woman gets off is going to have the same general traits, personality traits, that could carry over into being an effective father, husband type, you know. So where this one collapses is well, first of all, the divorce rates, whew, but then the idea that we have pretty much established that there is this icky tendency within the human animal for ladies to sneak out and try to get a more optimum genetic potential for their child, and then have that child raised by a safer and less unpredictable, but not as genetically desirable man. And I'm not saying they all do this, but I am saying that it happens enough that it is a strategy. So you got to look at the strategies, and if the strategy keeps cropping up everywhere, that means it is an evolutionarily sound strategy, which means we didn't just invent it in the past 100 years. Especially if you look at like the rates at which it happens. You know, if you just like Google infidelity rates, especially as pertains to uncertain parentage, like society didn't invent that. We didn't figure that out. We didn't build castles. You know, it wasn't agriculture, castles, and then cheating. That wasn't how we invented things, right? Which brings us to the conclusion of not only the chapter, but the entire book. So I would ask you, what do you think? Do you have a favorite, Buck Bookers? Or do you just feel sick? Just feel sick and confused? Because that's okay to feel too. You can feel however you want. I don't care how you feel. You're just feelings, they go away. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes you're just like this forever. Do you feel like you'll be like this forever? Talk about it in the comments. You got another book you want me to review? Do you like this garbage? And are you into evolutionary biology, psychology, the specific book you want me to talk about? Because odds are good I've already read it. Like, if you have a recommendation for me and it wasn't written in the last 10 years, I've read it. So I would be happy to review it, but I need to know. You need to communicate. This is all about communication. So let me know. Like, follow, subscribe. Any questions, comments, recipes, leave them. I will do my best to answer them, or I will ignore you if you're being petulant. I will have another Buck book for you within a couple of days, I'm sure. I'm about to have even more days off. It's big. It's a big day off time for me. Everything's wonderful. All right. Thanks for stopping in.